The rain soaked through my last clean shirt as I stood outside Thorne Manor, watching the heavy iron gates hiss shut in my face. Water dripped from my hair, mixing with tears I refused to let fall completely. "A thorn doesn't fail, Isla," my father Arthur bellowed from the covered porch, staying perfectly dry while I shivered in the downpour. "You crawled back here like a stray dog, but I don't take in runts." His words cut deeper than the cold rain. I'd driven 6 hours with everything I owned stuffed into 2 suitcases, hoping my childhood home would offer shelter after my marriage collapsed. Instead, I found locked gates and a father who cared more about his reputation than his daughter's suffering. Arthur pulled a yellow envelope from his jacket and tossed it through the iron bars. It landed in the mud at my feet with a wet slap. "Take that and disappear," he spat. "Consider it the price of your shame. The Thorne name means something in this town, and I won't let you drag it through the dirt with your failures." The gate lock clicked, a sound that felt like it was severing 28 years of family ties in a single, terrible second. I watched him turn his back and walk into the warmth of the house while I stood shaking in the storm. My fingers trembled as I bent down to pick up the muddy envelope. The rain had already started to blur the ink on the front, but I could still read my name written in Arthur's sharp handwriting. "My name is Isla Thorne, and I had just been disowned for being the victim of a cheating husband." The injustice of it burned in my chest as I tore open the envelope under the flickering street lamp at the end of the driveway. I expected a restraining order or maybe a check with a note telling me never to come back. My father was cruel enough for either option. But as I pulled out the papers inside, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a check. It wasn't a legal order to stay away. It was the original deed to Thorne Manor, yellowed with age and dated 40 years ago. My hands shook as I scanned the document, squinting through the rain. There, in small print at the bottom, was a rider clause that made my heart stop. Ownership passes to the firstborn daughter upon her 30th birthday. My birthday had been yesterday. 24 hours ago, while I was packing my things and leaving Simon, I had turned 30 years old. I looked back up at the house, at the warm lights glowing in every window, at my father's silhouette moving past the curtains. And for the first time in my entire life, I wasn't afraid of Arthur Thorne. The memory of catching Simon still felt like a fresh wound. 3 weeks ago, I'd come home early from my part-time job at the library, hoping to surprise him with his favorite dinner. Instead, I found him in our bedroom with her. His assistant, Victoria, wearing my bathrobe. But the affair wasn't even the worst part. Over the following days, as I dug through our finances preparing to leave, I discovered what Simon had really been doing. My small savings account, the money I'd inherited from my grandmother, had been completely drained. Every penny had been funneled into Victoria's consulting business, which turned out to be nothing more than a front. $23,000. When I'd called Arthur, desperate and broken, begging for just enough help to hire a lawyer, he'd laughed. Actually laughed. "Keep your mouth shut and serve your husband, Isla," he'd said coldly. "A woman who can't keep her man happy has no one to blame but herself. You probably drove him to it with your whining." I'd hung up feeling more alone than ever. Now, standing in the rain with his disownment envelope in my hands, I realized Arthur's cruelty had just handed me the keys to his kingdom. I spent that night in my car outside Ruby's diner, parked under a streetlight with my engine running for heat. The deed sat on the passenger seat, protected now in a plastic bag I'd gotten from a gas station. Sleep wouldn't come. My mind kept racing, trying to understand what had happened. Arthur had meant to send me away with some cruel parting gift, probably a legal document declaring me cut off from the family. But somehow, impossibly, he'd grabbed the wrong papers. As dawn broke, I finally understood. Arthur's lawyer, old Mr. Pemberton, had been showing signs of memory problems for years. Everyone in town whispered about it, but Arthur kept him on because Pemberton knew all the family secrets and would take them to his grave. Pemberton must have pulled the wrong file from the archives. And Arthur, in his arrogance, hadn't bothered to check what he was throwing at me. He'd probably told Pemberton to prepare disownment papers, and the confused old man had grabbed the manor deed instead. Arthur's pride had always been his weakness. He assumed everyone would jump to obey him, that nothing could challenge his authority. He never imagined that his own contempt would be his downfall. I watched the sun rise over the diner's parking lot and smiled for the first time in weeks. Silas Crane's law office was nothing like Mr. Pemberton's dusty old practice. Everything here was sharp, modern, and slightly aggressive, just like the man himself. Silas had a reputation as the lawyer you hired when you wanted to destroy someone legally. He also had a well-known grudge against my father. "Isla Thorne," he said, leaning back in his leather chair with a predatory smile. "I've been waiting 20 years for someone to walk through that door with what you're holding." I slid the deed across his glass desk. "Is it real? Can he fight it?" Silas examined every page with the intensity of a jeweler appraising a diamond. His smile grew wider with each line he read. "Oh, it's real. More than real, it's ironclad. This deed was part of your grandfather's estate planning. He didn't trust your father, so he built in protections." Silas tapped the rider clause. "Your father has been living in your house for 30 years, Isla. Legally, since yesterday he's been your guest. And guests can be asked to leave. He'll fight this. He'll claim it's a forgery or... Let him try." Silas's eyes gleamed. "I'll represent you pro bono. Your father ruined my brother's business 15 years ago with lies and legal tricks. I've been waiting for payback. Consider this my early Christmas present." 2 weeks after Arthur threw me out, he hosted his annual Man of the Year dinner at Thorne Manor. The event was legendary in our town, an evening where Arthur gathered all the local elite to celebrate himself under the guise of charity fundraising. I watched from my car parked down the street, as expensive vehicles lined the driveway. Women in evening gowns and men in tailored suits climbed the steps to the manor, greeted by Arthur himself, resplendent in his custom tuxedo. Through Silas's connections, I'd learned that Arthur was telling everyone I'd gone abroad to recover from my divorce. He'd spun a story about sending me to Europe to heal, painting himself as the generous father supporting his troubled daughter from afar. The lie was perfect. It explained my absence while making him look compassionate. No one would question why I wasn't at the dinner. After all, I was supposedly sipping wine in Paris, not sleeping in my car outside a diner. Arthur stood on the manor's front steps, soaking in the admiration of the town's most powerful people. He was at the absolute height of his social power, completely unaware that the ground beneath him was already crumbling. I took a photo of him standing there, proud and untouchable. I wanted to remember this moment, the last time Arthur Thorne felt like a king. My younger sister Lydia found me 3 days later. She'd gotten my number from my old phone bill and called, whispering urgently, "We need to meet. Somewhere Arthur won't see us." We chose a coffee shop 2 towns over. Lydia arrived looking nervous, constantly checking over her shoulder. At 24, she still lived at home, trapped under Arthur's control just like I'd been. "Isla, I'm so sorry about what happened," she said, grabbing my hands across the table. "What Arthur did was horrible. But there's something you need to know." She pulled out her phone and showed me emails between Arthur and a real estate developer. My blood went cold as I read them. Arthur was planning to sell the family's apple orchards, the beautiful 20-acre property that had belonged to our mother's family for generations. It was my favorite place in the world, where Mom used to take us to pick apples every fall before she died. "He has gambling debts," Lydia whispered. "Bad ones. He's been losing money at the casino 2 counties over for years. The orchards are his only quick source of cash." "How much does he owe?" "Over $300,000. He's desperate. The sale is supposed to close next month. The developer wants to turn it into a shopping plaza." I felt rage building in my chest. Arthur was going to pave over our mother's memory to pay for his poker losses. Not if I could stop him. The deed hadn't just transferred the manor to me. Buried in the fine print was a mention of a small trust fund, $35,000 that had been held for the firstborn daughter's benefit. I'd never known it existed. Arthur had certainly never mentioned it. With Silas's help, I accessed the trust and immediately used it to place what he called a stop order on the orchard sale. The legal mechanism was complicated, but the effect was simple. I became an anonymous entity that blocked the transaction. The developer received a notification that there was a competing claim on the property. Until it was resolved, the sale couldn't proceed. And resolving it would require proving ownership, something Arthur would discover he couldn't actually do. "How long will this hold him?" asked Silas. "Months. Maybe longer if we're strategic about the filings. Every time he provides documentation, we'll find some small technical issue that requires clarification. Death by 1,000 paper cuts." I thought about my mother's face, the way she used to smile while making apple pie from fruit we'd picked together. Arthur had already stolen so much from us. He wouldn't steal this too. Do it. Make him fight for every inch. Silas grinned. "With pleasure." The first crack in Arthur's facade appeared on a Tuesday morning. He received a formal notification that his business accounts were being audited due to a claim of ownership on his assets. Lydia called me immediately after, barely containing her laughter. You should have seen his face. He was having breakfast, reading the paper like always, and then the courier arrived. He read the letter 3 times, getting redder each time. What did he say? He called it a clerical error. Told Pemberton to handle it. He was actually laughing about it, saying someone had obviously mixed up paperwork. Lydia paused. "Isla, he has no idea it's you, does he?" "Not yet. Let him think it's a mistake. Let him feel safe." Arthur's confidence would be his downfall. He was so certain of his power, so convinced that nothing could touch him, that he'd dismiss every warning sign until it was too late. The audit would take weeks. During that time, his accounts would be frozen. His ability to make major financial moves restricted. He couldn't sell the orchards. He couldn't transfer assets. He couldn't do anything except wait and slowly realize that something was very, very wrong. I imagined him sitting at the breakfast table, laughing off the letter, completely unaware that his daughter, the one he'd thrown out in the rain, was systematically dismantling his empire. The discovery came by accident. I was meeting with Silas to review documents when I noticed a familiar name on one of Arthur's bank statements. Victoria Chen Enterprises. Victoria. Simon's mistress. Why would my father be sending money to my ex-husband's girlfriend? I asked, pointing at the transfers. Silas's expression darkened as he pulled up more records. What we found made me physically sick. For the past 3 years, Arthur had been funding Victoria's business. Regular monthly payments, always exactly $5,000. And the dates aligned perfectly with when Simon started becoming distant, when he began working late and traveling for business. "It's a deal," Silas said quietly. "Your father paid your husband's mistress to keep him occupied." "Why would he?" I stopped, realization hitting me like a truck. "My mother's assets. The trust funds she left me." Silas nodded grimly. "If you were happily married and distracted, you wouldn't be paying attention to your finances. Arthur's been systematically draining accounts your mother set up for you. He needed Simon to keep you busy while he transferred everything into his own name. The betrayal was a perfect circle. My father and my husband's mistress, working together to rob me while Simon destroyed my marriage. They'd all profited from my pain. I'd thought I'd hit rock bottom before. I was wrong. This was deeper, darker, more calculated than I'd imagined. The pawn shop was in a rough part of town, the kind of place my father would never be caught dead in. But Lydia had overheard Arthur on the phone, mentioning the address, so I decided to investigate. I walked in trying to look casual, scanning the glass cases. And there, in the jewelry section, I saw it. My mother's wedding ring. The delicate gold band with tiny sapphires that she'd never taken off until the day she died. Simon had stolen it from my jewelry box. I discovered it missing a week before I caught him cheating, but he'd sworn he didn't know where it was. "How much for this ring?" asked the clerk. "That one's part of a hold. Customer hasn't picked it up yet, But he's got 3 more days. Who's the customer? The clerk hesitated, then shrugged. Man named Bernard Willis. Comes in every few weeks with stuff to sell. Bernard Willis. Arthur's business partner. I walked to the back of the store, pretending to browse, and that's when I saw them. Family heirlooms I recognized from Thorne Manor. My grandmother's silver candlesticks. An antique clock from the library. A painting that used to hang in the dining room. Bernard was helping Arthur liquidate family treasures, probably taking a cut for himself. I returned to the counter. I'll buy everything Bernard Willis has on hold. And I'll pay double to make sure he gets a message that someone bought it all. The clerk's eyes widened. All of it. That's like $15,000 worth of. Done. Ring it up. Arthur was having his usual Saturday breakfast. Poached eggs, toast, black coffee, when the courier arrived. Lydia was there, pretending to read a magazine while secretly recording on her phone. The courier handed Arthur a thick manila envelope. Sign here, please, Mr. Thorne. Arthur scrawled his signature without looking up, assuming it was business correspondence. But when he opened it and pulled out the papers, his coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. Notice to vacate premises. 72 hours. What the hell is this? Arthur's voice was low and dangerous. He scanned the document, his face shifting from confusion to anger to something close to panic. The notice was official, filed through the county, complete with legal stamps and case numbers. This is ridiculous, he finally said, tossing the papers aside. Some competitor trying to rattle me. Probably Peterson. He's still angry about that land deal last year. But Lydia saw what Arthur missed. His hands were shaking slightly as he picked up his coffee. Some part of him, deep down, recognized that this wasn't a prank. The notice listed a case number. If Arthur bothered to look it up, he'd find it was connected to the ownership audit. But he wouldn't look. His pride wouldn't let him believe anything was actually wrong. He had 72 hours before everything changed. And he was going to waste them in denial. I waited until Sunday evening to call. I wanted Arthur to have spent the whole weekend dismissing the notice, convincing himself it was a joke. I wanted him comfortable and complacent. The phone rang 4 times before he answered. What? His voice was irritated, distracted. Hello, Arthur. It's Isla. Silence. Then. What do you want? I thought I made it clear. I hope you enjoyed the master bedroom, I interrupted, keeping my voice calm and cold. It's been mine since I turned 30. You have 2 days to get out. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear his breathing change, could almost feel the realization starting to creep in. What are you talking about? But his voice had lost its certainty. The envelope you threw at me in the rain. The one you thought would send me away forever. You should have checked what was inside before you threw away your kingdom. You're insane. I don't know what game you think you're. Check the deed, Arthur. Page 3, Section 7, Subsection B. Read the rider clause about ownership transfer. Then call your lawyer. Oh wait, Mr. Pemberton's the one who gave you the wrong file, isn't he? I heard something crash in the background. A glass maybe, or a plate. 2 days, I said softly. Tick-tock. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking with adrenaline and something that felt gloriously like justice. Arthur called an emergency family meeting for Monday morning. Lydia texted me updates in real time, hiding in the corner with her phone. Arthur paced the dining room like a caged animal, disheveled and wild-eyed. He'd clearly been up all night going through papers, trying to find something, anything to prove I was wrong. This is a legal attack, he announced to Lydia and Bernard, who'd been summoned as witness. Your sister has gone insane with grief over her failed marriage. She's making claims that have no basis in reality. He slapped a document down on the table. I need you to sign this, Lydia. It's a statement declaring that Isla is mentally unfit, that she's having a breakdown and making delusional claims. Lydia stared at the paper, then at our father. I'd talked to her the night before, told her everything. She knew the truth now. "No," she said quietly. "What did you say?" I said no. Lydia stood up, her voice growing stronger. "Isla isn't crazy. She isn't delusional. And I'm not going to lie for you anymore. You ungrateful little." "I'm done, Arthur." She'd stopped calling him father weeks ago. "Isla offered me a place to stay when this is over. I'm taking it." She walked out of the manor, leaving Arthur staring after her in shock. It was the first time anyone in our family had openly defied him. And it wouldn't be the last. By Tuesday afternoon, the entire town knew something was wrong at Thorne Manor. It started with the horses. Arthur owned 4 expensive thoroughbreds that he kept in the manor's stables, status symbols he'd parade around at local events. On Tuesday morning, professional signs appeared on the stable fence. "For sale. Immediate purchase required." Then the cars. Arthur's vintage Bentley and his weekend Porsche both got similar signs in their windows, along with a phone number. The number went to Silas's office. Neighbors started talking. At the grocery store, at the coffee shop, at the bank. "Have you seen Thorne Manor? Everything's for sale. Is Arthur having money problems? I heard his daughter's back in town." Nancy Morrison, the biggest gossip in our neighborhood, posted photos on Facebook with the caption, "Trouble in Paradise? Man of the Year looking more like Man of the Hour." The comments section exploded with speculation. Arthur's carefully crafted image of success and stability was crumbling in real time, destroyed by a few pieces of paper and the town's endless appetite for scandal. By evening, even people who'd attended his Man of the Year dinner were whispering behind his back. The king was falling and everyone wanted to watch. Wednesday morning, Arthur stormed into Westfield Bank like a hurricane. I knew because Lydia was still in the house and heard him making the appointment, and because my friend Cassidy worked there as a manager. Cassidy called me as soon as he left. "Isla, that was intense. Your father came in demanding access to his accounts. He was yelling about illegal freezes and lawsuits and how he'd have everyone's jobs." "What happened?" "Mr. Reeves, the bank manager, took him into a private office. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard Mr. Reeves say, 'I'm sorry, Mr. Thorne, but this account is in the name of the owner of Thorne Manor. And according to our records, that's not you.'" I could picture Arthur's face, the way his skin would have gone purple with rage. He demanded to see documentation. Mr. Reeves showed him the deed filing. "Your name as current owner, dated to your birthday." Arthur tried to claim it was fraud, but Mr. Reeves said everything had been verified by the county recorder's office. How did it end? Arthur threatened to move all his money to another bank. Mr. Reeves said, "That's your right, sir, once the ownership questions are resolved and the accounts are unfrozen." Arthur left looking like he'd seen a ghost. For the first time, Arthur was facing the real, concrete consequences of losing the manor. No access to money. No control. No power. That evening, alone in a hotel room I'd finally been able to afford, I opened the yellow envelope again. I'd been so focused on the deed that I'd missed something tucked in the back. A second, smaller envelope. Sealed with my name written in handwriting I recognized immediately. My mother's handwriting. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter, dated 6 months before she died of cancer, when she knew time was running short. "My dearest Isla, if you're reading this, then Arthur has finally shown his true colors. I've known for years what kind of man I married. Cruel, controlling, obsessed with money and status. I stayed because I was scared, because I didn't know how to leave, because he made me believe I couldn't survive without him. But I won't let him do the same to you. I convinced my father to add that rider clause to the deed before he died. I told him I was worried about my girls' futures. He loved me enough to protect you, even from your own father. Arthur doesn't know about this letter. He doesn't know that I purposefully hid the deed where his own arrogance would someday lead him to throw it away. Men like Arthur always get careless. They think they're invincible. Be strong, my darling. You are worth so much more than he'll ever tell you. Take what's yours. Build the life you deserve. All my love, Mom." I cried for the first time since this all began, not from sadness but from love. My mother had saved me from beyond the grave. Simon showed up Thursday morning, and I knew immediately something was wrong. He never got up before 10, but here he was at 8, clean-shaven and wearing an expensive suit I didn't recognize. He found me at Ruby's diner, where I'd become a regular. He sat down across from me without asking, flashing that charming smile that had once made my heart race. "Isla, you look good. Really good. What do you want, Simon? I heard you came into some property. The old family manor. That's amazing, really. I always knew you were stronger than you thought." He reached across the table for my hand, pulled away. "Look, I've been thinking. We were too hasty. The divorce, we don't have to go through with it. People make mistakes. I made mistakes. But we're still married. We can fix this." I stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time what he really was. A parasite. He'd heard through the town gossip that I'd somehow ended up owning Thorne Manor, and he thought he could charm his way back into my life and my assets. I pulled 2 documents from my bag and slid them across the table. The first one is an itemized bill for the $23,000 you stole from me, plus interest. The second is a restraining order. You have 72 hours to get the money or I file criminal charges. His smile vanished. "You can't." "I can. And I will. Stay away from me, Simon. You're not welcome in my life anymore." I left him sitting there, flowers wilting on the table. His schemes shattered. Saturday evening, 5 days after the eviction notice, Arthur threw one last desperate party. He sent invitations to everyone who'd attended his Man of the Year dinner, insisting the clerical errors had been resolved and he wanted to celebrate. Only a handful showed up. The rest had read the gossip, heard the whispers, and decided to distance themselves from his scandal. I arrived at 8 p.m., not in a ball gown or fancy dress, but in a sharp business suit with Sheriff Morrison beside me. Silas followed, carrying a briefcase full of legal documents. Arthur was in the foyer, playing host with increasingly desperate energy. When he saw me, his face went from fake smile to genuine horror. "What are you doing here? Get out. This is my house." "Actually," I said calmly, "it's mine. And I'm asking these guests to leave. This party is over." Silas handed each guest a copy of the verified deed as they passed. By the time they reached the door, they understood exactly what was happening. Arthur Thorne wasn't the master of this house. He never had been. The sheriff stayed beside me, his presence making it clear this wasn't a family squabble. It was a legal matter. Within 20 minutes, the house was empty except for Arthur, Lydia, who'd come with me, Silas, and the sheriff. Arthur stood in his own foyer looking lost and small. "You can't do this," he whispered. "I already did." This was the moment from the title. The moment everything crystallized. Arthur drew himself up, trying to summon his old authority. "This is theft. You've stolen my home through lies and manipulation. Sheriff, arrest her." Sheriff Morrison just shook his head. "Mr. Thorne, I've reviewed the documentation. This isn't theft." I reached into my bag and pulled out the original deed. Not the muddy, crumpled version from the envelope, but a pristine certified copy I'd gotten from the county recorder. I'd had it cleaned, preserved, and officially documented. "Read it," I said, handing it to Arthur. Page 3. Section 7. Subsection B. His hands trembled as he took it. I watched his eyes scan the page, watched the exact moment he found the clause. "Custodianship of the property by Arthur Thorne shall terminate upon the firstborn daughter's 30th birthday, at which time full ownership transfers to said daughter." "Custodianship," I said quietly. "You were never the owner, Arthur. You were the caretaker. And your job ended on my birthday, the day before you threw me out in the rain." His face drained of all color, going from red to gray to a sickly white. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He realized it all at once. He'd thrown away his kingdom with his own hands. The envelope that was supposed to humiliate me had freed me instead. His cruelty had been his downfall. "Get out of my house," I said softly. "You have until Monday morning." Sunday was moving day for Lydia. While Arthur locked himself in one of the guest rooms, refusing to speak to anyone, my sister and I transformed the manor back into a home. I officially moved Lydia into the best bedroom, the one with the view of the orchards and the big window seat where we used to read as children. I'd already set up a trust fund for her education, using money from the various accounts that had reverted to my control. "You're really letting me stay?" she asked, eyes shining with tears. "Rent-free. You're my sister. This is your home. You'll never have to rely on a man like Arthur to survive. Not ever." We spent the day painting her room a color she chose, soft lavender, and hanging up photos she'd kept hidden for years. Photos of us with our mother. Photos from before Arthur's cruelty became unbearable. In the evening we stood together in the orchards, watching the sunset paint the apple trees gold. "What happens to him now?" Lydia asked. "He lives with the consequences of his choices, just like everyone else." Arthur had spent his life believing he was above consequences, that his money and status made him untouchable. Now he'd learn what the rest of us already knew. Actions have results, and cruelty eventually comes home. The second set of books came to light during the final audit. Arthur had been keeping false records, one set for the IRS, another showing his actual income and expenses. The discrepancies were massive. Unreported gambling income, hidden business deals, tax evasion spanning at least a decade. When Silas showed me the documentation, even I was shocked by the scale of Arthur's fraud. "What do we do?" he asked. "You have a legal obligation to report this to the authorities," Silas said carefully. "But the choice is yours." I thought about covering for him. He was still my father despite everything. But then I remembered my mother's letter, remembered being thrown out in the rain, remembered how he'd helped Simon and Victoria steal from me. "Turn it over," I said. "All of it. I'm not protecting him anymore." This wasn't revenge. This was accountability. As the new owner of the manor and majority holder in his business affairs, I had a responsibility to report illegal activity. I was doing what any responsible owner would do. The authorities opened an investigation within days. Arthur's criminal exposure went far beyond our family drama now. He was facing potential federal charges. His fall from Man of the Year to criminal defendant would be complete. By mid-October, Arthur had moved into a small apartment on the wrong side of town, the kind of place he used to sneer at while driving past. One bedroom, outdated appliances, thin walls where you could hear the neighbors fighting.